At exactly 3:15 a.m., the scream pierced through the thin hallway walls of Building 42B, not once, not twice, but for 7 consecutive nights. Then, on the 8th morning, every apartment was empty. Phones left charging. Breakfast half-cooked. Doors unlocked. 22 residents, gone. Not one trace. Not one witness. Except for the woman in 2C, but she hasn't spoken a word since. The first scream was dismissed as a bad dream. Mrs. Elkins, the retired schoolteacher in 1A, said she heard it around 3:15 a.m., sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, but heard nothing afterward. Just the distant hum of the building's old heating system and the steady drip from her bathroom faucet. She chalked it up to a memory, something her mind conjured from a dream she couldn't remember anymore. But the next night it happened again. This time, Jason Moreno, a night shift nurse from 4C, was getting ready for bed when he heard it. A scream, female, high-pitched, sustained for almost 8 seconds. He dropped his toothbrush in the sink and froze. It wasn't someone yelling in anger. It wasn't pain. It was terror. Raw, blood-freezing terror. He opened his door and stepped into the hallway, but everything was still. No one else was out. Lights flickered like they always did. The air smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and floor cleaner. Nothing unusual, except the silence that followed the scream. It was thick. Watching. On the third night, more tenants started to speak up. People whispered in the elevator. Parents told their kids not to ask questions. The building group chat, once used for lost packages and dog-sitting requests, began flooding with the same message. Did anyone else hear it? It always happened at the same time. 3:15 a.m. Never a minute before. Never a second late. By the 5th night, the residents were on edge. A group of them stayed up to record it. Phones in hand, voice memo apps ready, they waited. The scream came like clockwork. 7 seconds of hell, distorted, as if muffled by distance but close enough to feel like it was inside the building. They listened back to the recordings, but all they captured was static. In every clip, right at 3:15, the audio dropped out for 7 seconds. A silent void that replaced the scream. Then it came back as if nothing happened. Some blamed the old wiring. Others joked, nervously, about ghosts. A few thought it was someone playing a prank, using a speaker hidden in the vents or maybe a looped sound. But no one could figure out who. The building's layout made it nearly impossible to trace sounds. Thin walls, twisting hallways, and poorly insulated ceilings meant everything echoed in ways that made no sense. That same night, Amira Patel from 5B set up her baby monitor in the living room facing the hallway. It had night vision and audio, and she was curious. When she reviewed the footage the next morning, she found something worse than a scream. The video glitched at 3 hours 14 minutes and 58 seconds, right before the scream should have started. For exactly 7 seconds the camera showed nothing. Not black. Not static. Just a deep red frame, as if a filter had been applied. The timestamp vanished. The walls looked warped, stretched unnaturally. Then, at 3 hours 15 minutes and 6 seconds, the video resumed. Everything back to normal. She didn't sleep the next night. Reports were made. The building manager, a man named Colby Greaves, emailed residents insisting it was nothing. A freak coincidence, a plumbing issue, maybe even a car alarm from the street. But no one was buying it anymore. Especially after Colby himself posted a short message in the group chat the next morning. It read, "I heard it. And it was inside." The 7th night, desperation took over. A group of 4 tenants, Jason, Amira, an elderly man named Walter from 6A, and a college student named Ellie, met on the 3rd floor to investigate. They walked the hallways at 3:10 a.m., phones recording, flashlights scanning every crevice. When the scream came, it didn't come from down the hall. It came from above. Straight through the ceiling. Ellie screamed in return, her voice drowned out by the unearthly sound overhead. Walter later said it felt like something was pressing down on him, like gravity had shifted. Amira dropped her phone. When they checked the footage later, they found nothing. No audio, no video, just a single still frame frozen at 3:15 a.m. A few of them started sleeping with noise-canceling headphones. Others didn't sleep at all. Pets refused to leave their crates. A few neighbors moved out within 24 hours, claiming the screams had followed them into their dreams. And then a break. Jason's friend, a tech-savvy hobbyist named Renee, came by with professional audio equipment. She set up a directional mic and a digital recorder in the hallway near the stairwell, the area where sound seemed to echo the most. That night, as 3:15 approached, Renee stood outside the building in her car, listening through her laptop. When the scream hit, the live feed stuttered, then resumed. Renee watched as the waveform on her screen flatlined, not silence but the absence of sound itself. A dead zone. Then a sound came through. Not the scream. A whisper. "Let me in." Renee never returned to the building after that. She deleted the files and left town. The next night the screaming stopped. And when it did, so did the people. It was the 8th night, and the building had gone unnaturally quiet. No arguing neighbors. No barking dogs. Not even the faint hum of a television through the walls. Just a pressure in the air, thick, still, expectant. A strange weight settled across the building, like the calm before something terrible. But no one could say what. That night the weather was clear. The sky was cloudless, full of stars that somehow looked sharper than usual. Crisper. The moon cast long shadows down the block, and a soft breeze rattled the rusted fire escape. Inside Building 42B, every apartment showed signs of life. The lights in 1C were still on. A kettle was whistling in 2D. Someone on the 4th floor had left their balcony door open, curtains fluttering slightly. All the signs of life were there. But the people were not. At 3:15 a.m., a delivery driver named Raoul pulled up to the front of the building. He had a late-night order, 2 bags of food for apartment 5A. No tip, but he didn't care. He just wanted to be done. He rang the buzzer. No answer. He rang again. Still nothing. Then he tried the front door, expecting it to be locked. But it wasn't. It creaked open slowly, revealing the dim lobby inside. Raoul stepped in, annoyed. The fluorescent light above flickered overhead, and the place smelled like burnt plastic and wet drywall. "Delivery for 5A, he called out, his voice echoing strangely. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of the broken light and the low whir of a vending machine in the corner. He took the elevator up to the 5th floor. As the doors opened, a cold draft swept in. Goosebumps climbed up his arms. He knocked on 5A. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Nothing. Then he noticed the door. Slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The lights were on inside. A laptop sat open on the couch. A glass of wine was half finished on the coffee table. A movie was paused on the screen, a romance, judging by the soft music still playing. A phone lay charging next to a purse. Raoul called out again. No one responded. The bathroom light was on, steam still fogging the mirror. The shower had recently been turned off. There was a towel on the floor, slightly damp. It looked as though someone had been there just seconds ago. But the apartment was empty. Raoul left the food on the kitchen counter and hurried out. Something was wrong, but he couldn't explain it. He felt watched, as if dozens of eyes were behind every wall. He exited the building without saying another word. The next morning, a neighbor walking her dog noticed something strange. Every mailbox in the lobby was still full. No one had picked up their letters. Newspapers had piled up outside a few doors. She found a package at her feet, soaked in dew, clearly undelivered for days. She buzzed every apartment. No answer. Not even the usual "leave it" from behind a door. Just silence. When police arrived, they searched every unit. It was like walking through a ghost town. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors weren't locked. Meals were left half-eaten. TVs were on, some flickering in the static of an unattended stream. Phones lay where they'd been charging. Toothbrushes still wet. A child's coloring book was open on the floor, halfway through a drawing. A board game sat unfinished on a coffee table. 22 residents. All gone. The only person found in the entire building was the woman in apartment 2C, Margaret Ellison, 46, recently divorced, quiet. Her door had been locked from the inside. When the officers broke it down, they found her sitting on her bed, eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. She didn't move. Didn't speak. She was breathing but barely. They spoke to her. She didn't answer. They asked her what happened. Nothing. She blinked but didn't respond. A nurse tried to calm her, to make her look away from the wall. She wouldn't. Finally, one officer placed a pen and notepad in her hand, gently closing her fingers around it. He whispered, "If you know something, anything, write it down." After 5 full minutes of silence, Margaret moved her hand and scribbled one sentence. "We heard her screaming, but it wasn't coming from this world." She hasn't spoken since. The building was evacuated and locked down. Hazmat teams checked for gas leaks. None were found. The security footage was pulled from every angle of the building, but something strange happened. From 3:14 a.m. to 3:22 a.m., the system recorded nothing. 8 minutes of black screen. Not a single frame. Then at 3:23 the video resumed, with every hallway and stairwell perfectly empty. All entries, exits, and windows were accounted for. No one left. No one arrived. It was as if every person had simply stopped being. Investigators searched records, looked into the tenants' backgrounds, their relationships, any sign of a shared connection. There wasn't one. They were strangers, different jobs, different histories, different stories. The only link between them was the building. And the scream. And now the building remains silent. Police patrol it daily, but no one goes inside. The lights still turn on at night, motion activated, though no one is there. Sometimes security guards outside say they hear footsteps on the upper floors. Or soft crying. Or the whine of a tea kettle boiling too long. But never again a scream. That only happened for 7 nights. And it was enough. By the time authorities began digging deeper into Building 42B, one room stood out. Apartment 3B. It wasn't suspicion at first, just logistics. Most reports of the scream described it coming from somewhere above, or from within the walls, or sometimes beneath the floor, always shifting, always uncertain. But over time, residents had begun to unconsciously cluster near the 3rd floor when trying to explain where it came from. They didn't know why, they just felt it. And Apartment 3B, strangely, had never been a part of the conversation. It should have been. According to building records, 3B was leased. A rental agreement signed, a payment history established, everything in order. But when investigators checked tenant interviews, no one could recall seeing anyone enter or exit the unit. Not once. No packages, no footsteps, no sounds, not even the faint thud of someone closing a drawer or dropping their keys. It was like the apartment existed outside the rhythm of daily life. The maintenance staff had no recent work orders for it. The mail carrier hadn't delivered anything there in over a year. When asked why no one questioned it sooner, the building's superintendent just shrugged and said, "I thought it was empty." Or maybe, it didn't want to be noticed. It took a court order to force the lock. When the door to 3B was finally opened, a cold, dry wind met them, as if the room had been waiting, holding its breath for years. Dust covered everything, but it wasn't natural. It was too fine, too even, like ash. The air had a copper tang to it. Not blood exactly, but close. Inside, the apartment didn't look lived in. It looked used. The furniture was old, arranged deliberately like part of a ritual. There were no personal items. No photographs. No clothing in the closet. No food in the cabinets. The windows had been painted over black from the inside, the curtains nailed shut. Dozens of mirrors lined the walls, all shattered, every last one. Cracks webbed across the surfaces, but none had fallen. It was as if something had struck them from within the reflection and then stopped. The floors were covered in symbols drawn in chalk and salt. Circles, triangles, runes no one could identify. The largest circle, 6 feet wide, sat in the center of the living room. Burnt candles surrounded it, melted to the wood. And just beyond it, beneath a rotted floorboard, they found a journal. The pages were warped and fragile, but most were legible. The handwriting changed frequently, rushed, obsessive, then precise, then erratic again. The first few entries seemed mundane. Grocery lists. Personal notes. But quickly it spiraled. "I can hear her," one page read. "Not a voice, a presence. She scratches when I sleep. She knocks when I think too loud." Another, "Time breaks here. I saw myself yesterday standing in the hall, staring at me. I didn't blink. Neither did he. Then, 3:15 a.m. Always. She opens the door then. Never sooner. Never later." Further into the journal, a name appears, Marla Vanish. A quick search linked the name to a local occult group from the 1990s that disbanded under disturbing circumstances. Vanish was a self-proclaimed medium who claimed she could thin the veil between this world and the next, not to speak with spirits but to invite them through. Her followers believed she had succeeded. One night in 1998, she disappeared from her apartment during a séance. Police found the room scorched, symbols burned into the floors. No body. No trace. The address of that apartment? Building 42B, Unit 3B. The journal seemed to confirm it. One final brittle page near the back read, "She needs voices to find her way. That's why the screams. She mimics the living until the door opens. When she stops screaming, she's chosen." That was the last legible line. After 3B was opened, the screams stopped. The building remained eerily still, as though something had been completed. The woman from 2C, the only known survivor, was shown the journal. Her reaction was small but immediate. She tapped one line over and over again with a shaking finger. When the nurse asked what it meant, she pointed at her own ears, then her mouth, then back to the line. "She mimics the living." When forensic analysts returned to re-examine the room, the apartment had changed. The salt circles were smeared, symbols partially erased as though someone had walked through them. But the door had been locked tight. And then came the discovery that chilled even the most seasoned investigator. The inside of the mirror shards, the reverse of the broken glass, had fingerprints. On the reflective side. As if someone had been behind the mirror, pressing to get out. That same night, one of the officers assigned to cataloging evidence took a video on his phone to send to a colleague. It was a quick shot of the room, silent, still. But when he played it back later, just after he passed over the broken mirror, a voice whispered faintly through the speaker. "I found them." The video was wiped clean the next morning. Nothing would play. His phone bricked itself during a system update and never turned back on. Apartment 3B has since been sealed. Steel plates welded across the doorframe. No one enters. The entire floor has been condemned. But sometimes people walking by on the street late at night swear they hear something. Not screaming. Just knocking. From inside the wall. Always at 3:15 a.m.